Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode, we are talking episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back from the Star Wars trilogy, here with Paul Eaton of Galactic Comics and Collectibles. Star Wars week is in full force, and we're here to talk another Star Wars movie. And Paul hates Star Wars, as you'll find out in this episode. But before you listen, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, all that stuff, as well as rate, review, subscribe, all those things over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everywhere you can find your podcasts, as well as their YouTube channel. You can go over there and check that out and capesandtights.com. So this is an episode talking The Empire Strikes Back from the Star Wars original trilogy here with Paul Eaton of Galactic Comics. Enjoy, everyone. The Empire of Paul Strikes Back here on the Capes and Tights podcast. Welcome back,
Whoa.
Paul.
Whoa, I'm back. Look at that. Didn't you have to go to Hoth or anything?
It's the funny thing is we're actually recording it on like one of the nicer days of the year, so it's like it's
it
not
doesn't feel
like a
like
hot
Hoth.
planet, yeah. Which is one of those things
that
that
like February the 4th be with you or something.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it would feel like Hoth.
But that's one of those things that I think I actually start off with that, and this Empire Strikes Back discussion is that I respect the change. Big thing about Star Wars is it's in space, so people always just assume spaceships, black skies with
Right.
stars, and all this stuff. George did a great job over the first three films and all the films to do like change of scenery. Like obviously you get a lot of like desert planets and things, but like there's jungles, there's cold weather, there's deserts, there's space, there's spaceships. Like it's not like you're just stuck on like I feel like
space stations, you get all sorts of stuff. No,
I feel like
definitely.
there's some sci-fi movies where you're just like the whole movie is just on a spaceship.
Right.
And it gets kind of boring in that sense. But like no, like the beginning, this starts off in a winter planet. And I was watching as we get rolling into this, I was watching that documentary, finishing that documentary, Empire of Dreams.
Mm.
And they filmed the shot where Luke is like walking out into the snow.
Yeah.
And they all were in like the entryway to the hotel they were staying in, and it was blizzarding. And they like the camera crew and all the directors and everybody else was like inside the warmth. And they're like, Mark Hamill, just walk out there. And they
Just
made
go.
him walk out, and he turns around. They're like, yeah, hold on 1 second, come back, do it again. And he's freezing his balls off, and everybody else is like drinking hot cocoa inside watching him do it.
Hey, I'm glad I'm not that guy.
Yeah. But before we get into Empire, but I wanted to do one off the top thing is I watched this documentary and Lucas's explanation of why he updated these films and why the
Okay.
graphics are better. And I kind of understood and kind of felt for him is that he didn't have the technology to make the movie that he really wanted to in 1977. So like he
Yeah.
has the ability, it's his own movie, his own thing. And here's the deal.
I
It's
have some thoughts
Disney's
about
fault.
this. Yeah.
The reason why we have those are the only movies you can get. So it's really not George's fault because George released those in 1997 as special editions. They
Right.
weren't the actual thing, and it didn't like. I don't
Yeah,
think it was
you
years
have
later
the
before they
option to
actually
watch
like.
both.
Yes, now it's just Disney's like, no, this is the one, and they don't.
Right.
They don't even have the other one. That is like Disney's fault, not George's fault, in my opinion. My opinion, George is like, why not create special editions? There's director's cuts. There's all these
Yeah.
other versions of something. But when George released it, I think they were still on the shelves. You could buy the regular in the special editions, and then slowly it became that the special edition title was dropped, and it was just Empire Strikes Back. It was just A New
That's
Hope,
it.
and
That's
that
what
was
you
it.
get.
So I understand that, but in the same sense, you are hindsight's 2020. So when you make a movie, it's a movie. They didn't go
Yeah.
back and change Back to the Future, or he never really did. He go back and change anything in Indiana Jones?
I don't think so. I wonder if there is a director's cut Indiana Jones that has like some fresh stuff in it. Because I mean, Indiana Jones is another one that definitely like for its time is great, but if you were really looking at it for what could be done now, it would look a lot
Yeah.
better. Like clean up. That being said, I once again had not seen this like version of the movie, and I once again sort of disappointed with all of these like extra bonus scene stuff that gets added that doesn't really need to be there. Although I feel like Return of the Jedi had less of it.
Mhm.
I could be wrong, but it didn't seem like there was as many like
The big thing I
add-on
think,
stuff in this one as there is in the first,
well, I mean, it
in
was
Star
3
Wars New
years
Hope
later, so
or
there are
in
some things they were able to do differently. He learned a lot. He had a bigger
Mm,
budget, so maybe that's why. His
yeah.
budget in ended up being $30 million of this movie when it was 11. for A New Hope. So like
Yeah, I
maybe
read
there's
about
that.
that. Yeah. And he
Uh,
actually got more budget, like as they were going,
yeah,
like, oh, we're gonna need to spend more. But then
because he
it made a fortune. Like,
he financed the first $18 million of this movie by himself. So his profits from A New Hope and then a bank loan he financed to make this movie to hold on to his rights for the movies. Like he
mm,
didn't trade, hey, I'll give you 50% of the rights to Star Wars in exchange to finance this movie. Because obviously the film industry is based on a lot of that stuff where they're putting the risk up of the millions of dollars if it doesn't make that money back. They're the ones that lose it, not George,
yeah.
and so on and so forth. So he took $18 million of a bank loan and his profits from A New Hope to make this movie to retain the rights. Obviously, looking back on it, Paul, one of the best decisions he ever made in his entire life
I
because
think
he
it
sold
worked
the
out
company to
for him.
Disney for $4 billion years
Yeah.
later. And
I think it
so
worked
there's
out.
that
I think it
aspect of
worked
it.
out over the time. I don't think at any point did George Lucas be like, "Oh man, I don't know if we're gonna be able to like cover groceries this week, or you have to cut back a little." Like,
But
if
his
he did something terribly wrong. Because
he was saying though that like difference between
looking at the
like bank
budgets of this,
financing, like financing through a bank on your own and financing like a movie by yourself is that there's no leeway in a sense. There was like, oh,
right?
this movie's not out yet, and you're asking for more money. That's it. Cut the financing off. You owe us all this money now. We're done. Move them away.
Yeah.
Whereas in the
Well, it makes
movie
sense
industry
because there's nothing for
financing,
the bank to like
yes,
repossess. There's nothing the bank to gain, right? So, like, yes, they could make back a huge amount of money if it's successful and they get all of their interest rate back and whatever. But if it flops, they have nothing for recourse,
so there's a
realistically.
possibility if he didn't have the money to pay some of these loans or to be able to work with these banks and say, I want to still do this the way I'm doing it, he would have sold off some of the rights and yada yada yada. It would have been different.
Right. Right.
Thing he would have been able to make the movie because basically made the movie that he wanted to. That's the other thing is because he's financing, he's doing it to like we'll release it, we'll make a bunch of money on the back end. But the guy who worked at 20th Century Fox at the time, who made this deal, got fired basically and like ostracized because of the deal was so
Wow.
bad for Fox in a sense because like how much money George Lucas
How
made
much
off of this.
everybody else got with them,
But the
basically.
problem was is that the guy was like talking on this in this documentary. He's like, dude, the theater, the company still made millions and millions of dollars off of these
Yeah.
movies. There was still profits to be made off of
That's
it.
just
It
like
just happens to
basically
be
greedy
made.
at that
They didn't make
point.
as much money as they could. It's like it made them their Fox's normal like annual revenue or like profit in the year was like $30 million in 1976. In
Mm,
1978, it was like $70 million solely because of Star Wars, and they're still fired the guy because they didn't make $100 million. It's like, oh my god,
wow.
people, seriously. But
Yeah.
yeah, but that was the thing. It's like if you can go back and change it, cool. I do think that some of the changes I'm happier with than not. Adding more stormtroopers behind a crowd of people that only like two or three, okay with that because it gives like
Yeah.
depth to it and shows how many stormtroopers there are.
Yeah.
Adding that stupid creatures they were on the sand, looking through the desert looking for the droids in the first movie was not necessary. And so there's like a
Yeah.
difference between what you could do and what you can't do. And at the same time, Paul, I'm reading the biography of Anthony Daniels called
Okay.
IMC3PO,
Yep.
and he was talking about it filming, basically sucked filming the prequel trilogy because George
Wow.
loved technology so much that he just wanted to make everything. Like there was no even attempt or thought process that, hey, we should do this practical. He's like, nope, green screen, blue screen. We'll just put it in there. Don't worry about it. Like half the shots that R2D2 and
Wow.
C3PO are in are not actually there. They're just CGI'd in later and stuff like that. And so it's like he was disappointed in the fact that they did such a good job with the first three movies that George relied too much on ILM's technology of making
Yeah.
Star Wars fake things. But you know I don't know. I hate to say because there's certain people like I love technology. So if I can use a computer to do something or a phone to do something, I want to do it more that way than practical effects. But I
Right.
don't know. I can see it both ways, and I think we just had such a good. He did such a good job with the first three movies that you know you kind of ruin the lore of Star Wars by making these original trilogy or sorry the sequel
Right.
prequel
The
trilogy
the
so digital.
prequel. Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
and that show, the prequel trilogy definitely shows as a lot of CGI and now has an age as well because the CGI is so much
Yes.
better
So
that
that,
it
yeah.
looks that way.
So can he
So
go?
one of
So could
my
he, if he still owns Star Wars? This is obviously sidetracked because this is obviously about the prequel trilogy. If he
right.
still owned the rights to Star Wars, would he be allowed to go back into those movies and update those CGI things.
Probably.
Like,
I imagine they probably
put
would.
millions
Yeah.
of dollars into a re-release of updated graphics on things because they
Back in
probably
the
could do that.
theaters, the whole
They have the
deal.
original files. They just pull the old CGI away and put new
Yeah.
CGI in. And it should be fine, right? I mean, it sounds. I'm making it seem like it sounds so simple, but it does sound so
Right.
simple. I mean, this is just a
Right.
green screen. There's the original files somewhere where they just delete the original CGI and then ILM goes back in and puts new CGI in there. That would be cool,
Clean up the
honestly.
whole thing, clean up the whole
I would
mess.
appreciate that, honestly. I think they actually could make some money off of the prequel trilogy by doing that. But
Yeah, but they probably could. And like have a whole new launch of that because there's a whole generation that loves 1, 2, and 3 Star Wars. That was their Star Wars. So if you
yeah,
put that back in theaters with, some new scenes and new like
this would have
cleaned
been the
up
year.
shots and stuff, everybody would
It's
have
the
done it. Yeah, it really
25th
would have been.
anniversary
Yeah, it would have been the perfect year
of
to do
Phantom
it.
Menace. But yeah,
So one thing I would say watching this now, like I'm sure I watched it at some point on like a Blu-ray, but most of my watching of the Star Wars movies is on VHS. So
yeah,
now in such a high clean definition, to me, Yoda really, really looks like a puppet.
yeah,
Like really looks like a puppet. And like as a kid listening to Yoda, I was like, oh, it's Yoda. But now being older and having so much more, I don't know, so much more of this stuff in our face, right? Like everything you see more. All I can think of is Jim Henson. Like it
yeah.
looks like a Muppet. It sounds like a Muppet. Like the voice actor they had did a tons and tons of Muppet characters. Watching the Muppet Christmas Carol every year,
Yeah.
Yoda could just be in that. Like it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't. So I feel like I had a harder time this time, honestly, with this movie in that section of it. And I think on the VHS tapes, like they're darker, they're not as clean, and his movements are sort of blurred a little. So like it's a lot more forgiven.
Yeah.
Watching it now, he like it looks like a guy's moving the cane with the stick and moving the Muppet
Well,
after like
well, that's what people say when they started doing this. Like, this is kind of a funny comparison, but when they came out with 4K pornography, people were like, no one wants to see that in
nobody
4K.
wants to
Like,
see
there's
it.
no the people that
Yeah.
want to do that for a living and out there are not the kind of people you want to see in 4K. And it's like
Uh,
maybe it's one of those things that we did have a benefit to a lesser quality
yeah,
picture. You can get away
a
with a little
lot
bit
of the
more.
imperfections were forgiven.
Yeah.
And it's almost like now it'd be nice if they went back and made that section not so
Yes,
well.
exactly. But
Well,
obviously, he would be killed if he took away Yoda as a puppet and put him in as a
yeah,
CGI
you have to
character.
have Yoda there. You have to have Yoda as a puppet. I think it's
Well,
true.
there's two things on that. One
But
is
maybe not clean up that as
he's an
well.
iconic character. There's
Yeah.
a couple things I want to. There's a good topic to start on here. Is he's such an iconic character, Yoda? Like he is like a in the pantheon of what top
I'm gonna get
six most recognizable.
I'm gonna get like
Uh,
blacklisted for the things I say about Yoda and stuff, aren't I? Like, it's
no, but
gonna
like
be
but like
I'm gonna
he's a
start seeing
top
my
10
followers like decline.
out of all the characters that George Lucas created for Star Wars universe. He's top 10 Star Wars characters, and he's only in just under 18 minutes of the entire 9 movies.
Yeah, it's insane.
And it's crazy to think about how much of a thing. And so funny is Darth Vader's in 45 minutes of the original trilogy total.
That's also
But
insane.
compared to Luke Skywalker, who's in 2 hours of the original trilogy, like total, like because obviously there's side shots and there's all that, now they break down. Someone
Yeah, you
broke it
get all
down
the
online.
space stuff, you get all this, you get all
Um,
that.
But like, do you think we have like because he's such an iconic character and he's well loved and he was, ahead of its time in the time of making Yoda a puppet and things like that, is that we give it a little bit more forgiveness on both the way he looks in the movie nowadays as well as the way he talks. That like if someone created a
Yeah,
character in the movies nowadays that talked like that, we'd all be like, what the hell is wrong with you? This was ridiculous. Why
yeah.
does he need to
No, I
talk
think
this way?
I think you definitely have like forgiveness for it, the nostalgia glasses of it. Like Yoda's Yoda. I remember watching 1, 2, and 3 and being excited when I saw Yoda, right? Like, hey, there's Yoda. Look. Oh, and then like the fight scenes with Yoda in
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 where he's all over the place and young and going all over, and you're like, wow, Yoda's awesome. I see how he's like the surviving Jedi master, right? So yeah, I mean, I think Yoda's not my favorite Star Wars character, but I like Yoda and I think it is. But watching it now and watching it from like an all out, like let's truly look at this movie, like Yoda is kind of rough.
Yeah.
Yoda's kind of rough.
Here's the other part, Paul. How old is Yoda? Like hundreds and hundreds of years old, right?
Yeah, he's like, what is he, like 700, 800 years old, something like that?
This movies are made, and again, this is one of those ones where we're going to be on the same page here. Some of this stuff is like, these movies are made and most of the main characters speak English.
Right.
Okay. And Yoda is around enough Jedi and doing all these things over the number of years. In 700 years, he hasn't learned how to speak proper English.
He's just stubborn. He's just old and stubborn.
I'm thinking to myself, if I had 700 years and I live in a Spanish speaking country, I would probably speak Spanish at some point. And
Yeah, pretty well. You think you'd adapt.
Even
Yeah.
my English would probably be way better 700 years later, speaking English for 700 years. It's just kind of funny how, like, and I don't know how many of those years did he not talk? Like, I mean, we see Grogu in the Mandalorian, and he's not speaking. So
he's over 100 years old, right? Like Grogu's been like this legend for like 100 years, and he's still an infant.
So like, there's that aspect of it too, but that's just kind of funny. But I was like,
yeah.
So, but yeah, Yoda is an iconic character of Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back, a lot of people just use the Darth Vader of all. Like the cover of the movies always have a Darth Vader background. Yeah. The name Empire Strikes Back just like says Darth Vader in the whole thing. Yeah. It's a sequel. It obviously stars all of the same people from the first movie, plus Billy Dee Williams jumps in there, and obviously Frank Oz jumps in there too because that's who voice and
puppeteers Yoda.
Yeah. And so there's that love thing. They've got Hoth. We've got AT-AT walkers. We've got
so cool.
Han and Leia's budding relationship, but also the fact that she kisses Luke in this.
Yeah.
And George Lucas's love for incest and weirdness going on in this movie. And then you got like, this is like the reason why I feel like this is the best Star Wars movie. It's because it has a little bit of everything. It has that love story. It has Yoda. It has droids. It has Hoth, AT-ATs. It has lightsaber duels. Like it has all that in it.
I'm going to throw out that I think the Battle of Hoth is the greatest Star Wars battle of all of them. I don't know.
Except for the AT-ATs seem like they're really too easy to beat.
First, they're terrifying. If you were one of these ground troops and that thing's coming at you, like literally... They're on this like snow planet, right? And they're sort of like burrowed underneath it, and the place is shaking, and snow's falling from this thing walking, and it's still like miles off, and it's walking, and it's shaking the whole like foundation. That's terrifying. And like if you're just like here you are with your little blaster rifle that isn't doing a damn thing to it, like that's terrifying. No, yeah, you get into like, all right, the snow speeders can take it out using the toe cables, but before that, they're flying, shooting at it, not doing anything.
Yeah, you're right. But I just like, and everybody's out there just like, well, we go into this too. It's AT-AT. If you hear someone say AT-AT, smack them in the face. I'm just telling you right now, because
I say AT-AT.
But the funny thing is, it's like, I always thought that too. I was like, oh, AT-AT, but it makes sense because everything else that's a machine or a droid of some sort is always saying the letters. And so why would this be an AT-AT, an R2-D2?
Well, and you have the ATST. You're not going to say an ATSTA.
Yes. No.
The ATST is the two-footed version instead of the four-footed version. Which it looked like, I don't think, I noticed in one of the scenes, there's an ATST in the background going past the AT-AT. Yeah. And I don't think that was in the original, because I don't think we saw ATSTs until the third movie. So that must have been like an add-in. Well, that was one of the things that just made the battle scene look bigger and stuff. And that was cool. That's
cool. One of the things that you talked about with Adam when we did the prequel trilogies a couple of years ago, which you can listen to. We have them on our library. Is that the droids in the first three movies, like the droids in episodes 1, 2, and 3 are so like crazy different. There are some of the droids that are in this, like, and machines that are in this, but it's like the ones that like the ball. I'm gonna get destroyed by Star Wars fans, but the ball that rolls around and shoots up with General Grievous, those are not in this movie because it was a creation by George Lucas for the prequel. But like, this is funny. Like, none of that stuff would be in here. You wouldn't see one somewhere.
Yeah, you don't get any of these like battle droids and this and that. No. Yeah, because those I can't remember what those things are. I can't remember what the battle droids are called either. Shoot, yeah, the ones that like roll and then they open up and they have a shield over them. Yeah,
that's battle droids. You don't see any of that stuff. Like, you don't even see like
those things are a mess. I can see maybe they stopped using those like, Roger ones. Like, Roger.
Well, like, you don't even see like
those ones that roll are like, those things were terrifying to try to fight. You would think they'd keep using those things,
but like you wouldn't see like a hodgepodge where someone like put a piece of a battle droid, like the head of a battle droid, on something else or anything. Like, it just
yeah, it's kind of funny that
there's a Reddit article.
It's like they got the stormtroopers and they're like, all right, we'll stick with these guys. Even though you think droids would be easier, like following command, they can't be Jedi mind tricked, even though they think the Jedi are destroyed by then. But there's no way to like control them through that. So it's funny to like just we're just only gonna really use soldiers now. Like you
Yeah,
gotta
it's
feed
fine.
these guys, you gotta do everything
Yes.
else. The droids are like what? They're probably like solar powered, and you just stick them out there.
This is a person who wrote on this on Reddit. Is it ever explained how droids in the prequels and other prequel media like Ahsoka and Rogue One are significantly more advanced than droids in later movies?
Yeah, the droids in
Like
later movies are just sort of there. They're just
a trash can. One of them's a trash can.
yeah,
And
the
we have a
trash
trash can in
can.
this one. I'll tell you right now, Paul. We have a trash can in this one too. The trash can droid shows up in this movie in
Is he in
Jabba's
Cloud City?
palace. He's in Jabba's palace.
He's in Jab. That's the next
Oh,
movie,
sorry,
right?
next movie. Sorry, yeah, he's in
That's the
this
next
that
movie.
movie.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's not in this one. Yeah,
No, I have my
yeah,
notes open next to each other. I just opened the wrong one.
right.
The Yes, the Hoth is amazing, but there's also the Star Wars, the ultimate duel between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, which is amazing. So you get like
Yeah, it's a good scene.
you get lightsabers, which is like iconic for Star Wars. I would think your Hoth part planet is probably one of the more recognizable planets in the Star Wars pantheon, right? I mean, like
I think
this
so.
opening
Yeah,
scene in
and
this movie is like with he like cutting open the bantha and like the
I
whole
thought the
line
thing
about I
smelled
thought you
bad on
smelled
the
on the
outside.
outside, and saving Luke and thinking that is this the end of Luke? Did we almost
Han
lose
is
Luke?
Han is so much cooler in this movie than he
Yes,
was in the first movie. In the first movie, Han's cool, and this one, like Han is like the coolest. Like, you know, your Tauntaun freeze for you make the first marker, then
yeah,
I'll see you in hell. Like,
he was badass. He he
I don't know what
he.
happened to Han, but Han's had enough.
I think is a lot that I actually wrote a note on here. This movie is definitely made better, like all around.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
obviously you
Well,
learn from your first one, you get the ability to do the second one, you have a little bit more
I
technology 3 years later.
I always think with
Ah,
sequels it helps too because the characters are all done. We're not like having to get into this whole introduction who they
yeah,
are. And by now the actors sort of have figured out what they're doing, right? With these characters. They know who that character is. They built them. I feel like sequels a lot of times I like sequels for that aspect.
yeah,
Like so yeah, in this one we've got all of our like ground laid, who these people are, what they're doing. And yeah, Leia is like way more like badass
yeah.
general in this than like I don't know, the first one she's badass, but she's very like, oh, the princess. We gotta save the princess, whatever. And this one she is like much more in the role of being like starting that role of general and the troops listening to her and everything. And I personally also go on to Hoth of I think the Snowspeeder is the coolest vehicle. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I've always just thought the Snowspeeder was the coolest. Like
yeah, I
when
can see
the
that.
Star Wars video games started coming out, and you get the Battle of Hoth and you get to fly a Snowspeeder, that was my jam. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, I'm like playing that board over and over and over again. The Snowspeeder, even though taking down the AT-ATs are a pain in the butt in that game.
yeah.
But that was my jam. I was like, yes, finally the Snowspeeder.
Well, I mean, like I said, part of me is like, I don't know the whole history of these things, but like, how much of this stuff was written down ahead of time? How much of it was like between episode one or episode four and episode five?
Hmm.
Did George start making this and writing this stuff? Obviously, like as he's making the movie, he's rewriting things and doing things and things like that. But the difference is he didn't direct this movie, and that's one thing that thing is
Yeah, I
George
thought that
Lucas
was interesting. I
only
read
in
that.
the original trilogy he only directed episode four, A
Yeah,
New Hope.
yeah. He decided because he wanted to focus more on the effects and
He wanted to,
everything, and he had his own
he's running
special
a
effects
company.
company. So yeah,
He had to run
so
the
he
company,
stepped
all this stuff.
aside.
He's like, I just can't do it all at the same time. And I'm like, this is your baby. I feel like this is one of those things that you. So he wrote it. He wanted to hire Steven Spielberg to direct
Right.
this, which would have been interesting to see. I mean, this movie was
Yeah.
amazing as it was. I can't imagine seeing Steven at the helm of this, but
I wonder
he
how
ended up
much
hiring.
different it would have been if Spielberg had
Yeah,
done it.
that's a good
Would it have
question
been
too.
that different in the first place, or like would we be still looking at more or less the same movie?
Same movie, yeah. Irvin Kershner ended up being hired, but the reason why he didn't get Steven Spielberg is that at the beginning of this, did you know this? He left because of something. I forget what it was. Now I can't remember exactly what it was. There was a thing that he wasn't allowed to do. Or no. Oh yeah, that's what it was. The credits. So the credits of a movie made in 1977 and 1980, they had to by the WGA and the Actors Guild and all those things had to be put at the beginning of the movie. That's why you always see the credit rolls on a
That like
movie at the very beginning of
insanely
the movie.
long start to every movie back
Yes,
then.
that was
Yeah,
part of their
lots of
their
useless scenes usually.
contract agreement with the guilds and all these things that
Okay.
had to be done there. He got an approval because of what he wanted to do for 1977's A New Hope to put them at the end because he wanted that the crawl, he wanted the opening scene to have so much
Yeah.
impact that you wouldn't want to be distracted by people's names and things like that. He just did it on his own in episode 5. So in Empire Strikes Back, he just put him at the end without the approval, without the thing,
Right.
and they fined him $250,000 for doing this.
Which, in the grand scheme of things, is like whatever.
They also fined the director and a bunch of other stuff too. Lucas paid all the fines and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But because of that, he was so pissed. He just says, "Well, screw you guys. I'm leaving all the guilds." So he left the producers guild. He left the actors guild. He left all the directors guild, writers guild. He left them all. And because of that, he couldn't get Steven Spielberg because Steven Spielberg was part of the directors guild. And so at that moment, he had this time where he had to get someone that was not part of the guild or whatever. And that's how he ended up with Irvin Kershner. And so that is an interesting thing on that.
So now, talking about like Steven Spielberg and all the Steven Spielberg movies, like I think I've probably seen the majority of, if not all of Spielberg's movies.
Of the good ones, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's go with that. If someone told you or you didn't know, would you sort of think this was just Steven Spielberg anyways?
Well, what's funny about it is like
if somebody was like, "Oh yeah, Steven Spielberg did Star Wars," would you really argue? You'd be like, "Okay."
The first thing people would think about is, "Oh my God, wait, George Lucas didn't direct this?" Like that's the first thing I think about. It's like in my mind,
I just assume that Lucas. Yeah. I assume Lucas did everything, right?
Yeah. But he didn't.
Yeah, but if somebody said, "Oh yeah, 5 and 6 were directed by," you didn't have your phone or they're directed by Steven Spielberg. I don't know that I would have argued that. Might have been like, "Oh really? Okay." Like
which
adds up. It looks right.
Which is funny because he has proof that was because in 1981 he went on to direct Raiders of the Lost Ark for Lucas. So that was a thing that Fox screwed that up by firing that dude I mentioned.
Yeah.
Then George Lucas said, "Well, screw you. Then my next big project is not going to be with you," and that's why he went to Universal. And Fox could have had the rights to Indiana Jones if they would have just not screwed all the pooch up. So Fox didn't make very good decisions over the years.
Fuck.
We are comic book fans here, and we realize that Fox hasn't been the best movie makers in the world of comics too. So
they do a stellar job of mediocrity at best. Yes. Yeah, they're very good at being mediocre. 100%.
It's interesting. So with George not directing it, maybe we got a better film. Like I said, I do think this is better than A New Hope. So maybe with the new,
I think so too.
Another person looking at something and calling the shots with George stepping back and doing some of the more technical stuff and the more big picture stuff. Maybe we got a better movie out of it. And that's it's a good thing to have a second opinion, in my opinion. Like it's a good thing to have. It's not when you're making decisions for your comic book shop. It's you and Liz. It's not just you. Having that extra set of eyes, even if it's your partner, even if it's your wife. It makes sense. It's still a second set of eyes. And this one's someone who doesn't know the source material. Like your wife isn't like, "I think you should do this with Captain America because
Right.
She doesn't know it. But same thing with Irvin Kershner didn't know the whole lore that George Lucas wanted to tell. And so you have someone with fresh, clean, untainted eyes. I think it's a great idea. I think that's what happened with this. I think that's where we got a better movie than the first movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like Return of the Jedi. How boss is Han Solo with the Leia running to tell him that she loves him? "I love you," and he's like, "I know." There's a little bit of a risky of a whole.
She said no. He forced himself on her though too. It's tiny bit, not much.
Yeah,
when they're in the cave and she's like, "I know," and he grabs her arm, not forcefully, but just like lightly grabs her arm and kind of pulls her close to her, and she's like, "No." I'm like, yeah. At this point, I don't know if that would have gone over very well now.
Yeah, probably not. But I don't know. I mean, that's the hard.
No, I know it was innocent. It wasn't.
But yeah, later on, there he's getting put in the carbonite, and she steps forward, and "I love you." "I know." Like
yes, yeah. And then she you can tell it. The
argument on Hoth is like epic. I still laugh at this. I've seen this 1,000 times. I still laugh at their arguments, and she's like, "I'd rather kiss a Wookiee." He's like, "I can make that happen." I can arrange that.
Scruffy looking nerf herder.
I say that constantly to my kids. I tell Caitlin she's a scruffy looking nerf herder constantly.
It's funny because I'm like, he looks way more put together in this movie than he did in the first movie. He's not scruffy in any sort of fashion, but I'm like, I'm just like, that's a great swear. If you think that's a Star Wars swear.
Who's scruffy looking? That's what insults him, not the nerf herder part. Whatever a nerf.
But like you can see that in the beginning, it's that romantic tension that you're hoping. You're like, and then when we saw it for the first time before we found out, I mean, it was spoilers alert that they're brother and sister, Luke and Leia. It makes sense that they would be the key romantic part.
Yeah, and you have this Yeah, and meanwhile, with not knowing that, you have this little romantic triangle first of
Yes,
like,
you're like,
well, does
I
she
don't
love
know.
Luke? Because
Yeah.
Luke's the clean-cut good boy, and Han's the
She is
bad
playing
guy.
both sides of it. You know that,
So,
right? Like you see
yeah,
this. Like she's like, I think she's setting herself up like when you're in high school and you're like talking to two different girls because you're like one might like you, one might, you want to make sure your bases are
right.
covered. I think she's doing both. She's playing both sides here, and then finally falls in love with Han. And luckily they did it that she falls in love with Han prior to finding out that they're
Is there an alternate
siblings.
universe where she ends up with Chewbacca?
Yeah, it's called a furry pornography movie. No, but like the idea that she didn't find out that she was like she didn't fall for Luke and pick Luke
Thank
and then
God.
find out they're siblings
Find
and
other
then they had to
twins.
change like
Yeah.
but she falls for Han and obviously that's George Lucas's point because she's like I don't want this to actually go further than this one kiss, which
Right.
I don't think he realized how much of an impact this kiss would have for years and years and years to come. It's like you made
Yeah.
siblings kiss in a movie that you knew
And
as a
and
writer
Leia
were
went after that kiss
siblings.
too. That
Yeah.
was like a passionate kiss there. Yeah.
And he lays back down, puts his arms behind his back, and he's
Oh.
just like, look at that there. And Han
Yep.
Solo's like, what the man? Um, did you notice that talk about Hoth and in that scene right there and the being attacked, the scar was that do you think that was because he had in that car accident?
Oh,
They were
maybe.
trying to like,
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was
anything look different from
pre-planned.
Luke Skywalker that this is the reason
Right.
why he had that scar
Right.
on his
So they
face.
get him out there in the snow monster or whatever, which there were a lot more snow monster scenes. Those were
Yes.
add-ins there. And I will say, like, they made the snow monster
A
that
Wampa
whole scene
Wampa.
like scarier, right?
It's called a Wampa Wampa, Paul.
Wampa Wampa. All right. So
Well, here's the deal. It
they
looks
made
like a
that whole scene
scary.
like more scary because like as a kid it was scary, but it was fast.
Yes.
He's in there, he cuts himself loose, he chops off the arm, he runs away. And that was basically the short and long of it. Instead, this thing's over in the corner, like eating the tauntaun. You assume it's a tauntaun. He's
Yeah.
chomping on there. And like I'd say it's a little more like horror
Well,
background there.
picture this, Paul. Picture this. Picture the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer came out prior to this. Okay.
Yeah.
So you know how we have this whole like trend nowadays of like movies going and things going into the public domain and people making like horror versions of
Right.
classic stories.
Yeah.
This just get this exact design to be a Bumble from or the monster
Rudolph.
from Rudolph. You know what I mean? That Bumbles bounce and things like that. Like that looks identical to the
Pretty
snow
close.
monster
Yeah.
in there, but like more like horrified. And I'm thinking to myself, all I can see every time I see
Chewing
this
on
is
the
it's
head of
it's in the cave. They're in the
Rudolph.
cave with Cornelius in the like it's all the same. And this is just a horrific version of that in that sense.
Yeah.
But and it's funny, they're not even on Hoth for that long, but I feel like that's what the focus of this whole movie. Like when you watch this movie, you
Yeah, I feel
remember
like you think
these
of Hoth
scenes.
and you think of like Cloud City
Yep.
and the battle, the lightsaber battle and stuff.
And
Yeah.
Billy Dee Williams and
I guess you think about meeting Yoda. Those are the biggest three keys to the whole thing.
yeah.
But yeah, Billy Dee Williams really isn't in this movie all that much.
But he's also a dick. Like so
Yeah. Oh,
so
totally.
he reminds me a lot as a Marvel fan, he reminds me a lot of Loki. Where like
Yeah.
he helps you, but then he also screws you over behind your back, and then he helps you, then he screws you
Right.
over behind your back, and it's like he's definitely all in it for himself. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if Han was like, "This is my girlfriend,
He's trying to
Leia.
be
I'm
like,
still gonna slide into those DMs," kind of thing.
oh yeah, he was
Because
still trying. Yeah, he was
oh
still trying
yeah,
big time. And
yeah,
then you get like he was trying to be what was right for his people because he
yeah.
was responsible for, however many people live in Cloud City there. But yeah, 100% like stabbing your I don't know if they're supposedly friends, stabbing his friend in the back. There's always
Acquaintance, but still just
there was a
screwing over
previous
someone.
tension. But
Well,
yeah, and you're screwing him over to like a cute, like you are giving him to the Empire, you're giving him to Jabba the Hutt, like that's pretty bold, like dick move, man.
Anybody funny about it too, though, and the other side of it, Paul, is that he quickly realized how shitty a person he was. Like within a half an hour of the movie, he like was like, "Oh shit, let me get you out of here. Let me try to help you
Do
now."
you think he would have even turned back if Vader hadn't kept like changing the,
yeah.
Be thankful I'm not changing it more. Do I have to leave a garrison of troops here? Like all these threats. If Vader had just been like, all right, cool, we got him frozen. Peace, we're out of here. Like, would he have just been like, all right, cool. Well, Leia and Chewbacca, here's your apartment you get to live in, and I'm gonna keep trying to slide in your DMs.
Yes.
Hey,
Who
your boyfriend's frozen. I'm not.
Chewbacca? Is he sliding Chewbacca's DMs?
Yeah, maybe.
They're just they're not even actually words.
Yeah, there's returns of cons.
Which is funny. So like, yeah, which yeah, it's funny how he also doesn't know how to speak English. And I mentioned that in Heir of the Empire, the book by Timothy Zahn, there's a Wookiee that knows how to speak English, and so it's like, how the hell has Chewbacca
not.
learned
I
English
sort
for
of
this?
thought with Wookiees, and I don't know because I haven't gotten that deep into the Star Wars lore stuff.
Yeah.
I sort of thought that he's like Groot. Groot's the same way where he keeps saying I am Groot, but actually Groot has like a telepath ability, a minor telepath ability. So you start understanding him. Like I sort of figure Wookiees are semi like that. Like it's not so much you understand the growl. It's after you hang out with them
monsters. Don't even kid yourself. They're dumb monsters that just. But so you meet
he's
another character.
He's smart enough to fix a Millennium Falcon and like put C-3PO back together, right? Like.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, he's like very strong. He is this big giant like animal that rips like limbs off things apparently. But overall, like Wookiees can be intelligent. They have blasters.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's kind of funny. It's just like the grunting. It's funny too, because like, I mean, you meet multiple new characters in this movie. We talked about like multiple iconic characters in this movie. So you got Billy Dee Williams, appearance as
Lando Calrissian.
Yes, thank you. My train of thought got totally screwed up there with your Wookiee impression. The Lando Calrissian you meet Yoda, right? Yep. So those are like new main big characters you get to meet. You also get to meet Boba Fett. In a sense, because he's on the bridge of
a lot of. I feel like there were definitely extra scenes of Boba Fett that he still doesn't do anything. He doesn't say anything. But
he says one line.
They added in.
He says one line. He says, "As you wish."
Yep.
And that's it. Yep. And it's funny because later on, I talked to Ethan Sachs this week on Star Wars Week as well. And later on, a lot of those characters show up in further episodes of Bounty Hunters comic books. They show up in Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett and all those movies. There's some of these characters you see on all those different ones that are on that bridge that he's talking to all the bounty hunters. All of them show up at future times in the Star Wars universe. They just don't say anything. They don't do anything. They're just there.
They write him in and add background. And so it's funny.
Boba Fett becomes this like iconic character with people getting tattooed and stuff like that. It's like the dude was on screen for 30 seconds in this movie.
Yeah. And my best friend, one of his favorite Star Wars characters is Bosk. He's always, Bosk. Yep. Bosk is like the lizard guy there that's toenails. Like when there's I don't know what he is, like one of the captains or whatever on the Star Destroyer. But he turns around and he looks up there and the Bosk's claws are like clicking. And whatever reason, my best friend Dawn was like, Bosk is the best. And I'm like, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't do anything. Like, we have no idea what he is. Bosk never even shows back up again, I don't think, really.
Like I said, he shows up back up in like the TV shows and then
you get in the TV shows and the comics and everything else. But as far as the movies go, for our childhood, for him to think that Bosk is so cool is amazing because he has the same amount of screen time as but he has the same amount of screen time as Boba Fett.
Well, no, actually, so Boba Fett has 6.5 minutes of total screen time in the entire original trilogy. Okay, we talk about the Yoda being surprising that he's such an iconic character with 18 minutes. This guy has 6.5 minutes, has very few speaking lines, if any, and became this like iconic character. It almost reminds me of the new Minor Threat series coming out from Kyle Starks and Ryan Brown about a character that was at the bar in the original series, Minor Threats, called Barfly, and now there's an entire new series about it. It's like it was this whole like people gained attention to the mystique and the mysteriousness of Boba Fett and his cool suit. It also had to do with the parade, and you've known about this part, right? The parade that they tried to get characters out there to do it, and Darth Vader was one of them, and the other one that they had a suit ready to do and all this stuff at this parade in George Lucas's hometown, which was it was Boba Fett. And so Boba Fett was in this parade walking around. He was more in this parade than he was in all the movies. And people saw him, got autographs, took pictures with him and all that stuff. So they created this accidental hype for a character called Boba Fett. And then he went on, he has his own TV show.
Star Wars action figure, the original Star Wars series figures, Boba Fett's the most sought after one.
And he went on to have his own TV show and things like that. And obviously he was part of the holiday special in the animated part of it. So like all that stuff, which is funny because that all came out prior to this.
Weird.
The holiday special came
Weird.
out prior to this movie, and he was actually his first appearance on screen was the holiday
In the
special,
holiday
not
special. I didn't know
in
that.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because like I don't know, everybody loves Boba Fett. He's so cool, but like yeah, he doesn't really do a whole hell of a lot.
Which is
And
cool.
I would
I
be
like
nice
being
now.
the
It'd be
unique
nice to watch
person.
the original and watch this redo
Yeah.
because there's like a few scenes where he's taking shots at Luke on Cloud City, and I was like, was that there originally?
Yeah.
Like I don't even remember if that was there or if that was an add-on.
See, this is why this is the
there.
difference between you and I in this whole situation, and why I like Star Wars a lot and you absolutely despise it. Is you keep going back to that, and it's like, to me again, is the same thing. I don't care because I enjoyed the movies, whether it's different or not. I don't care about that because to me, there's certain things that do distract from it. It's they went back and added the CGI in a point where the CGI wasn't that good yet, even. So like your characters and your things you added, you're like, that doesn't look right because it was
We're gonna talk
added.
about that some in our next recording.
That was added in like just around the same time as episode 1 was being recorded. Yep. And it's like, okay, so that CGI was bad, so you're adding bad CGI to a movie that you didn't need to do. So there's that aspect but I still enjoy it because I'm like, okay, it adds to the experience. Obviously, there's special effects, the things they do where they like do a lot of reverse shots in this one, where they like film it forward and then reverse the shot to make it seem like he's using the Force and things like that.
Right.
And when they're sucking up the droids in episode 1 or episode 4, they drop the droids out and then they suck them back up and things like that. So like, you know.
Which was something I was thinking was funny. Something I was thinking was funny with this one that like came to me. So we crash lands in the Dagobah system there out in the swamp.
Yeah.
And you see R2 like wandering around the swamp. Like he gets out of the X-Wing, he falls off. And later on when he goes to leave, R2's back on top of the X-Wing. And then we download our R2 unit, we get them Bluetooth, he's all set to go. If you don't I sort of assume you had to use the Force to get him up there. And if you don't, and you're just out in space and you land, how the hell do you get this droid back up there? I mean, they seem to be heavy. He's not like lifting it. And
you learn this in the original trilogy or prequel trilogy.
Okay.
He fly.
Yes, because you did see that. You see him take off.
But you don't know that. You don't know that in this one.
Then why are they loading them in all the other spots? All the other ones they got this big
because they're inside.
Them up with their heads. They're putting them on
because they're inside. They're afraid he's gonna smash into the ceiling. I don't know.
You don't want all these. You don't want all these droids like flying around that aren't really all that trustworthy.
It's probably FAA regulations, Paul. Okay, let's be honest here.
But like, that guy needs his job. All right, we're paying him to pick the droids up and put them in the spacecraft. So there's an entire like long, extensive contract, and they have a union to fight if they got rid of those guys. So exactly. Okay, that adds up. All right,
you see, you're thinking too much of this. It's just but. Yeah, I don't know. There's like they said, I think this movie is one of those things, and maybe it's because I've watched this movie the most. Like if I'm just gonna pick a Star Wars movie right now, it'd probably be Rogue One because it is enough of a standalone movie that it's like fun because it gets you amped up to potentially watch the original trilogy because it goes right into it and all that. Like that's cool about it. But other than that, I think this is the one that I go back to the most. I think it's because it's got Hoth, because it's got Yoda and Yoda's swamp on Dagobah. Scenes. You've got the lightsaber battle and stuff like that. You have all that. You've got Cloud City and that stuff in there and so on, and the carbonite and all that stuff, which is funny because Harrison Ford wanted George Lucas to kill him off in this movie.
Wow.
He said someone needs to die in this movie to make it long lasting and so on and so forth.
Make it a war,
and so the idea potentially was that they put him in carbonite that he potentially wouldn't come out of carbonite. And then they convinced him to come back for the next movie.
For the next movie.
And they thought him out and all that stuff.
Yeah, because this ends like it ends sad. And this was definitely one of my things with this movie that I did have. And I feel like it's still an issue with subsequels now, is that this movie did not have an ending.
No, and I wrote that down.
It didn't have an ending at all. It was 2 and 3 here, or 4 and 5, say Star Wars 4 and 5, are one movie.
Yeah.
Or 5 and 6. 5 and 6 are one movie.
Split into 2.
And they just had to find a spot and be like, well, we're just going to cut this out.
Well, that's the thing is I wrote A New Hope allowed for sequel. Like A New Hope allowed for this sequel, like allowed the possibility, but it also had the possibility of just being it on.
We had the ending of New Hope.
But the end of this is definitely sets up a sequel. Like there's you find out he's your father. You find out that Darth Vader is his father. You find all that information out. You find the whole arm thing with
Yeah.
the, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen? What's going on here? And so there's like a bunch of stuff at the end of this
Lando's
movie that
Lando and Chewbacca are off
yep,
to go try to rescue Han.
yep,
Like if the movie never came out, if they never got 6 done,
yeah,
this would be the worst cliffhanger movie
yeah.
ending ever. You'd be like, what? Nothing is resolved. Nothing is solved in this. So this my only ever problem with this movie is I feel like you finish it and you've got to start the Return of the Jedi, else you just feel incomplete. Like
Well, I
you
mean,
don't
they
feel.
did it with Harry Potter's last book was Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2. I mean, they
That's
do it
because the book was
nowadays.
so
They,
big.
yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
if this
So,
was a book, it'd probably be massive.
across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse ended. Across the Spider-Verse didn't end.
No.
Across the Spider-Verse when it came out, they just sort of were like,
Well, you're right, because
This is where we're
technically
gonna wrap
Infinity
this up.
War and Endgame are both technically one movie in a sense. They originally supposed to shot that way, but there
Yeah.
is an ending, but still, it's not an ending enough that you wouldn't be
not-
pissed if it wasn't
It's not
follow up.
it's not a satisfied completion.
No,
And that's my only other thing I would have against this one is it doesn't feel like it really ends.
yes.
Like it's just sort of.
So I also wrote a note about ending here.
I do
Paul,
love
is
this movie.
if these films, any of the Star Wars movies, you're talking like just like if Star Wars, but mainly the original trilogy. If the original trilogy came out in 2020, 2022, and 2024, for an example, would there be post-credit scenes?
Probably.
Like it was
Probably.
before
You
the era
definitely
of
would have had
post-credit
like
scenes.
okay, so you would have had when Vader gets shot, in the opening in the first movie, and he's
Mhm.
spinning through space. I think you definitely would have had like him crash land on the planet and the whole Vader down thing, and then they
Yeah.
would have made a Vader down movie probably nowadays or TV.
There's so many
series or
options,
something.
Paul. I don't even want to
Yeah,
get
you would have had that whole story arc of what happened there. So I'm sure you would have had an end credit scene there, showing Vader and like him, like getting ready to come back for the Empire Strike Back.
I would have been pissed
Yeah, and
because
this
it would have
one you
finished
would have.
6.
I'm sure there'd be something like Jabba's palace, like them
Yes.
showing up and with like Boba Fett showing up with the carbonite Han, and like that whole thing would be an end credit scene for sure.
I think they would have been. I
Maybe-
think it would have
maybe
been
not the
great.
last
But they
one.
would have
Maybe the
done one
last
for
one would've been done.
6. They would have done one for 6. And then we never would have like it would have been like some sort of weird thing, but maybe it would have forced them to do a different thing for 7, 8, 9.
Six might have
like,
just
they
been
would-
a couple of Ewoks like sitting on.
Well,
the
no, but like
gonna
if
be,
end of 6, they could have like done
because
Thrawn.
6 ends happily. Like
They
6
could have
ends
put
with like
Thrawn
you're
in
happy
this
finish.
whole thing.
Yeah,
And like
you
had
were
us
gonna-
and like, ooh, and they would have been forced to do a 7, 8, 9 with freaking Thrawn, which still baffles me. You have this character that was
your love of
amazingly
Thrawn
made.
is like,
Oh God. And you're like over here going,
it's your love of Thrawn equals Don's love of Bosk. You know that, right?
but my point is like it's like obviously I understand it, and I can be like we have a guy that comes into your shop that is very anti Star Wars right now because of the fact that they had all these like legacy books and things like that. And he's pissed that they don't use that as adaptive material. I'm like, well, it's different in my opinion. It's a different. It's technically was at one point canon, but when the things are progressed and Disney bought it, they have to choose it. It happens that way. It's fine. It's more fan fiction than anything, in my opinion, and I'm okay
That's
with it.
his favorite Star Wars.
Yes, but like Thrawn is a character. Like
I think he's
Thrawn was the follow-up villain. There's never going to be a villain in Star Wars ever again that's equal to Darth Vader ever.
No.
But the next
no way.
best villain you possibly could get would be someone like Thrawn, and we ended up with Kylo Ren. Like that's my point. It's not even just that Thrawn is the best villain out there. It's the fact that that's what they went with was Kylo Ren over
Kylo Ren. Personal humble opinion is awful.
Yes,
there's nothing.
Casting's bad. I don't like the actor.
I do not find anything positive about Kylo Ren.
So
I think his image is bad. I think I don't like the casting personally.
No.
I think he's whiny. He's uninteresting. He's just bad. Everything about it is bad. And that's the problem, because I feel like they tried in that series, they tried to like get a little bit of Darth Vader back.
Yeah.
Let's try, because he's got Vader's helmet and he's got this. And it just doesn't work. Because if you're gonna do this and we want Vader, and there's no recasting Vader, there's no recreating him, nothing is gonna be as iconic as Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So there's no getting it back. My personal favorite character in all Star Wars, Darth Vader.
Yes. They're there. Honestly, the next best
Not
villain they could have used, obviously, because obviously it was a prequel trilogy, so they couldn't have used it. But if you would have put Darth Maul, hold on to Darth Maul and don't put him in the story of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. Darth Maul would have been a better freaking,
better villain than Kylo Ren. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Darth
find
Maul,
out again, another character has like
this other completely different person that the Jedi, the dark side is trying to train, trying to raise. Yes, that would
backup
be a better
plan.
storyline. That'd be
But
that would be a much better storyline.
another character that the Star Wars universe has lifted up and been this most amazing character has like 6 minutes of on-screen time.
That was something I never understood with the Phantom Menace. He's not on the freaking movie.
No,
He barely even says anything.
no.
And yet
But-
everyone he's like absolutely right up there with Boba Fett in the like
yes,
die-hard, passionate love of this character he doesn't do anything.
Again.
Because he has 2 lightsabers. Everybody thought he was cool.
also a double-ended lightsaber that no one else has in the
Yeah.
first. And then it makes sense that Kylo Ren has like a special lightsaber because that's after the original trilogy, so things have progressed.
Yeah.
But the fact that he has a lightsaber that's double-ended in the prequel trilogy
Then you don't
that
see
you
it
don't
again
see ever again, and he's the
Yeah.
only one that has it. And it's like, okay, this is weird. But yeah, like, well, why
This
does
whole
Darth
going
Vader
back to
not have one?
This whole going back to 1, 2, and 3 thing, we have the whole problem again with Ben Riley with Ben Kenobi being like, oh, that our boy is our only hope. Oh, there's another. Hey, well, Ben, like, you can't tell me Obi-Wan didn't know that.
Yeah. No, he
Like,
didn't.
Obi-Wan didn't know about Leia.
He's too much
at
peyote.
all.
He's smoking
He's
too
old,
much
he
peyote.
He forgot. Yeah.
But yeah,
no,
so in the
all
grand
those
scheme of
years in the
things,
desert doing wizard crap, he forgot all about it.
this movie had everything. And again, here's my thing: is if Star Wars was ever made in one movie, there was never anything else. Star Wars, the movie, this should have been the movie, not A New Hope. Like, you obviously
besides
need
not
A New
having
Hope.
an ending, yeah. Besides
Yeah,
not having an ending,
yes. You obviously, if this was the only thing you're ever going to create, you might have changed the ending a little bit,
Yeah.
to make it a little bit more, satisfying. But like this movie has like everything Star Wars you'd ever want in a movie. I think.
Do you give this 5 stars?
I give this 5 stars.
You give this 5 stars. All right.
It's one of my
Okay.
few 5-star reviews out of movies, honestly, because it's better than A New Hope, and I gave A New Hope 4.5 stars. So like, I don't give 0.75s or anything like that. So like, I'm giving this 5 stars.
If
I
I
know
could
it's
give it
not as much on yours.
If I give it a 0.75, I probably would. I guess I'd just still give it a 4 or 5.
There you go. That's fine.
Because my problems with the end, I think my biggest thing that I had as a kid was the ending. The ending just doesn't feel complete. Every time watching this as a kid, I would have to put in Return of the Jedi. Because if not, I just don't feel satisfied.
Great marketing.
With it. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And you have to force you to buy the second VHS.
Yeah, you gotta have it. Oh my god. And I had the special release VHSs that had the documentary, and rather than putting the documentary at the end of the movie, for some reason they put it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And for those that are younger and don't understand what that's like with a VHS, you're fast forwarding. Oh crap! Then you're rewinding because you don't want to watch the whole thing because it tells you the whole movie in the documentary. So there I am as a kid over and over again trying to get into the right spot of Return of the Jedi so I could start it.
They did that in a CD that I listened to back in like high school, where there's like a CD that like there's a sketch. Like Eminem used to have the sketches on his CDs, like in between, but it was his own track, so you could skip the sketch if you wanted to. But this band, for some reason, did it. It was like a sketch that was related to the song before it, but they did it at the beginning of the next song, and you always had to freaking listen to it at the beginning of the CD. Like you'd have to like scrub, try to get through the track without skipping to the next track. And it's like, and like when you're like, why wouldn't you just make it its own track? You could just make it its own track, or put it at the end of the last song. So if you don't want to listen anymore, you just skip to the next song. And it was so
VHS,
annoying.
You don't have those options, but it would have been nice to just put it after the. It would have made perfect sense to put it after the movie. I don't know why the hell it starts with it. So this is my childhood like gripe there on that. But yeah, so that I'd go 4.5 stars just because it doesn't feel complete.
Okay, that's fine.
95%
movie. 95% critic rating. 97% fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Those are both higher than A New Hope. And 8.7 IMDb score, which is an 8.6 for A New Hope. So it is slightly better in that sense too. So in this sense, it's not that much different what you're saying. Like you honestly, if it wasn't like 4.5 5, if it was like you can do anything, you'd probably put it at 4.6. You know what I mean? Like that. So you're at that same thing where it's like it's better than the first one,
and this got like
but it has
critical
its faults.
Like all of the big movie reviewers that were back at this time all liked this movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
like and that was not easy to do. Like these people were not easily pleased by things generally.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was always at least one of them that like if it didn't have an artsy background, then they didn't like it. And even those critics like this movie. So
yeah. So, but I think it's the best one. Well, why don't you tell us your own opinions out there, people? I've had 2 opinion emails and comments this week that have been fun. On the podcast, which is pretty funny. Yeah. Like,
and I was going to ask, I was thinking it was about our Star Wars review, but then that hasn't been released yet. So
someone sent me an email saying that I don't like Stephen King because I gave Cell, the book Cell, a 2.5 out of 5 because I just couldn't get into it. But then I like sent them back a response saying, this book and this book I give a 4 and a 5.
Yeah.
Two of my favorite horror books of all time are Misery and Salem's Lot, which are both Stephen King books. Like I
would
not like. I just
I
didn't
would
like this
definitely,
book.
if someone asked if you were a Stephen King fan, I would say yes. If somebody was like, "Oh, I want to get Justin something. Does he like Stephen King?" Justin
There's
likes Stephen
50 friggin' novels out there. You think that I'm not gonna like them all?
Yeah, and there's a chance that you're not going to like something. Like any authors like that.
The
You're
whole premise of Cell is
you don't
amazing.
enjoy as much.
Oh, it's post-apocalyptic zombie type book. It's like
Right,
Walking Dead with cell phones. And
Right.
you'd think that I would like it. I just didn't like it. And that's the thing.
You
So
can't get into it. That happens.
I just can't. Yep.
You're not going to like every book that a writer does. You're not going to like every comic that a comic creator creates.
And I gave
Some of them
5
are more
stars.
your alley and others aren't.
I gave 4.5 stars to Space Ghost, #1 from David Pepose over at Dynamite. Because I thought it was well done, well made.
I saw that. I'm excited to read that. Actually,
I'm not a big Space Ghost fan, but like to me, it got me set up. It got me going, got me ready. It's perfect for someone who's not into it. And so on.
I know the image of Space Ghost. I don't even know that much about Space Ghost. Besides,
and I got shit on because I gave it 4.5 stars because I've had David on the podcast and I'm just
a fan.
Yes, and that I should get some integrity. And so I thought to myself, okay, I can understand where you're coming from that, but in the same sense, like,
wow,
am I supposed to hate it because like
you know what?
How am I supposed to react to that?
I personally think that this is good. Both sides of this is good because you are getting somewhere when you actually have somebody that takes the time to be like, I don't like you and I don't like what you've done.
Yes.
That's when you got enough notice, you got enough recognition. It's not just your mom watching it going like, oh, honey, that's nice that you reviewed that.
I just, to me, I was like laughing.
It's not your friends. Somebody else out there was like, this guy sucks.
So he's been on my
podcast. So I'm impressed.
So he's been on my podcast. So I should hate the stuff that he does because he's been on my podcast. I can't like it because if I like it, it means I'm only liking it because he's been on the podcast. Right.
And then if you didn't like it, they'd be like, what the hell's the matter with you? He's been on your podcast.
So it is what it is. This person just, it was one of those, and it was a comment. And so it wasn't a social, and I hadn't even posted on social media yet. It means that someone found this article before I had posted it the night before, and I posted it, what's today? Monday? Last night or yesterday afternoon.
That's dedication.
Last night someone commented on it.
I haven't even read it yet.
The social media post dropped this morning while we were recording. So like,
I read the I don't know, the snippet about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But I haven't actually read the article. But the snippet, I was like, yeah, all right. You liked it. You give it a good review. I'll check out Space Ghost.
Yeah.
But somebody took the time to be like, really read that and crap on you for it. I'm impressed.
So we're going to finish this off before we go to the next episode. We're actually going to record these back to back, kind of like what they do nowadays with trilogies. We're going to stop and go into the next one really quickly. But Groot came out in 1960. Yeah. Chewbacca in 1977. Do you think he got inspiration?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Groot
was like a one and done issue.
I know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Galactic Comics and Collectibles is on Hammond Street in Bangor, Maine. GalacticComicsandCollectibles.com. They're on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Check all that stuff over there. Thanks, Paul. If you don't listen to the next one, we'll just thanks everyone.
Paul hates Star Wars.
And we have episode 4 available too. This is episode 5, and episode 6 is also going to be next available, as well as Adam and I chatted a couple of years ago about 1, 2, and 3, as well as I've talked Han Solo and Rogue One and the Star Wars Holiday Special. So check all of that out. The only thing we haven't done yet for movies yet is the sequel trilogy, which is kind of funny because next year, Paul, we should do the same thing and just do one episode where we talk about all 3.
Yes, I think that's probably a good.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
See you, Justin.